Good morning, everyone. My name's Jonathan Shapiro. I run a business called Lesco Manufacturing. We're a family-run business, third
Morning,
generation.
Jonathan.
Good morning. We're a third generation family business based in Johannesburg. To give you a brief background before we get into the presentation, just a bit of history. So my grandfather started a business in 1958. It was called Switch King, and Switch King focused on manufacturing distribution boards, switches and sockets, adapters, multiplugs, all electrical products that are used in buildings and in retailers. That business ran until about 1998. Unfortunately, it was liquidated. They had a lot of issues with labor that would strike, very difficult market conditions. So just a combination of things that ultimately led to the liquidation of that business. My dad started Lesco from his garage at home, and he really wanted to focus on inclusive employment. So what he did was he designed products so that they could be assembled by any class of labor. And he really focused on people living with disabilities. And he did that for two reasons. One is he wanted to be philanthropic and give back to communities. And two, he wanted to work with a workforce that had never been given an opportunity to work in the past, and one that would create a very symbiotic relationship between the business and the employees. So that business started out of our garage. He outsourced the labor to different institutions which had people with disabilities. He would send them all of the components. He designed the assembly equipment. They would then assemble the product, and then we would go and collect that stock and then distribute it to customers. So that business from 1999 up until 2010 was quite a successful business. Product ranges expanded, employment grew, moved out of the home to a small plot where one of the disabled homes was based. And I joined the business in 2009, straight out of school, didn't go to university, not very academic, kind of followed in my dad's footsteps, where joining the family business, and started in the warehouse, packing boxes, sweeping the floors, and then onto the production line, manufacturing products. And after that, progressed into sales. And what happened was, and this is what the presentation focuses on, is we had two distribution channels. One channel was selling direct to electrical wholesalers, and the other was selling to distributors, to middlemen who would then on-sell our product into retail. And what happened was our customers, which were the distributors, started to import their own range of products, and they very quickly became our competitor. So we had to pivot the business, go direct to retail, basically redevelop the business model, and that's what today we'll focus on. So I hope it covers everything you guys expect out of this topic. Please, if you have any questions, maybe write them down in the chat, and then we'll leave maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the presentation for you guys to ask as many questions as you like. Okay, so when customers become competitors. So as I mentioned, our distribution partners were selling our products into retail, and 2011, 2012, the rand was very strong, and they started to import their own products, not buying from us. And in that year, Lesco lost about 60% of its business. So its biggest customers became its competitors overnight. So it wasn't a shift that we asked for. It was something that we had to adapt very quickly to. And it also had other risks. The risks were, if we went directly to retail, what would other customers think who were still supporting us? Would they also go and import their own range? So it was a very difficult time. But we thought this was the only way to survive, was to go direct. And in hindsight, it was the best decision that we could have made. So direct to retail by design, rather than react, we repositioned Lesco to supply retailers directly, removing the exposed middle layer and building direct relationships with every major retailer and wholesaler. What it also showed us was the power of our story. So when we would sell our products to distributors, they would repackage them and then sell them into retail, but we never got to tell our story. And our story is a really powerful and impactful one. We will touch on it later on in the presentation, but we have close to 500 people in our business, and over 40% of our workforce are disabled. And we never got to tell the retailer that story until we went direct. And one of our first customers was Build It, but then very shortly after was Builders Warehouse. And when we explained to Builders Warehouse, the impact that our business makes in the communities that we serve, they were blown away. They couldn't believe that there was a manufacturer who was really inclusive, proudly South African, employing these sort of people, and they didn't know about it. And it really gave us our competitive edge, and we'll touch on that, where finding that unique selling point that makes you different, and how that helps you to grow your business. So much so, in fact, that the retailers that we work with and we supply their private label business products all tell our story on the packaging. So it's a co-branded private label strategy. Okay, so why did we make this move? So a distributor exists to solve two problems for a manufacturer: reach and risk. One manufacturer can solve these problems itself. The challenge is, how do you position your business? So one, it was a new division for packaging, a new division for distribution that understood retail and bookings and how retailers receive stock, merchandising, sales, making sure that the stock is presentable on shelf. So all of that comes at a cost. So while we can capture some of the margin that the retailer that the distributor, sorry, was making, the retailers also caught on to it and didn't pressure us too much, but also expected a better price once we were cutting out the middleman. So we were able to grab some margin, but I wouldn't want anyone to think that you just grab the whole of the distributor's margin. It doesn't work like that. The retailers expect a better price. You've got a higher cost of selling, but ultimately it is a better business decision. Okay, so how it's actually done? So it took us a long time, probably close to 10 years, to getting this new way of doing business ironed out and run very smoothly. So get retail ready first. So all the accreditation. So we had a lot of the quality accreditations, but something that we needed to get was an accreditation called SMETA, which is a responsible and ethical audit. More important, I think, for a business in our position, because of the labor force that we work with. So big retailers want to make sure that your employment process, the working environment, the labor rates are all above board and adhere to the highest standards globally. And this is an international standard that Walmart require for you to supply their divisions anywhere in the world. So the first one was with Build It in 2013, where we started supplying switches and sockets to the Build It group based in Durban, and then they would distribute to their own stores. So absorb what the distributor used to do. So warehousing, logistics, credit terms, merchandising. Something that is more challenging is the rebates that need to be calculated. So when dealing with retail, we had to have new cost accountants help us work out exactly what the rebates were, what's our net margin, what's the true cost of selling, things like that. And then scale retailer by retailer. So over years, not months, we went from one direct retailer, and now there isn't one major retailer in South Africa that we don't have a listing with. Okay, so going direct isn't free. So cutting out the middleman doesn't remove the cost of the work that they were doing, just moves the cost onto your balance sheet. So working capital, one, inventory definitely increases, but also credit terms. So we would have a standard 30-day account with most of our distributors. Retailers are a bit more aggressive. A lot of them require 45 days. Some of them are 60 days with settlement discounts. So it's the working capital pressures that are put onto a business when going direct to retail are quite a lot. Again, it's a decision we made out of necessity, and you have to find solutions for it. So we bank with two really good banks. One is our primary bank that offers us working capital solutions. So headcount, like I mentioned before, logistics, merchandising, key account managers to manage the retail accounts, retailer leverage. So retailers always understand their buying power and will often put pressure on a business to improve its selling prices to them. What we found in our business is we presented Lesco as a social impact business because of the communities that we serve, also a family-run business. And I think, using those 2 points to our advantage, we got favorable trading terms, which obviously help us a lot. And I would recommend that anyone who's in a small business, family-run business, or a social impact business really uses that to negotiate. So where we're at now is we have close to 500 people employed. We run our plant 24 hours a day. We manufacture between 350 and 500,000 products a month. 99% of those products are sold within South Africa. We are looking to scale outside of South Africa and replicate our business model in neighboring countries. We've had a lot of interest from international businesses that are looking at South Africa or Africa to gain entry. And since COVID, we've also had a lot of interest, and we've started working with other players in the space where they've decided not to import their products from China anymore, but rather work with a local manufacturer. So we have an OEM division, which is basically a private label department where we manufacture products not just for retailers, but for other electrical businesses, not all in our category, but other electrical businesses that would rather buy from a local business than importing. So when it comes to scaling a manufacturing business, volume is really important. There's an overhead recovery that's in our bill of materials. So every product that we sell, there's a portion of that sale that goes towards recovering our factory costs. So volume is incredibly important when in a manufacturing business. And the bigger we got, the more we had to recover. So we looked at various different channels and avenues. So the product range increased. We make a much bigger range of products now than we used to. We not only supply distributors, but we supply wholesalers, we supply retailers, and we also supply, as I just mentioned, other manufacturing businesses in South Africa. So grow with purpose. So really something that my dad installed in the business culture was giving back. And it was a challenging process to scale the business from a revenue perspective and a volume perspective and the employment model that we have. We paid a lot of time and attention to the disabled element in what we do. And what it kind of forced us to look at was, how do we scale the business, employ more people who are disabled, and still get the work rate and the output that we require? So we started a few different programs, and we partnered with other organizations that have similar programs. So as an example, we basically have a relationship with a special needs college where they'll send their students to Lesco for a few hours a week. They'll learn, they'll get some exposure to the working environment, to what business is. And our commitment at the end of every graduation is that we'll employ those college students that went through the Lesco training program. So we've done that now for 4 years. And we've got about 11 young adults that have gone through the program. And every year there's another intake of 4 to 5, or two, sometimes 4 or 5 young students who will come to Lesco. So that helped us to continue to provide work for people with disabilities, but also to do our due diligence with them to understand, are they the right fit for us? Are we the right fit for them? So we have that program. We work a lot with the deaf community. So we've been doing different training programs with the deaf community. We have about 100 people who are deaf in our business. And what we had to do is send our supervisors for sign language training. We've had to adjust our fire drill procedures to make sure that there's enough lights to show them that there's an emergency. So really adapting the working environment to cater for their needs. And in September next month, we're about to embark on our third and probably most exciting program, which is working with a nonprofit that has quite a large amount of people that are beneficiaries who don't have work, and we're looking at taking over that whole list of beneficiaries, bringing them to Lesco, providing them work, but also social care services. So they'll be offered therapy, different types of therapy for 3 hours a week, where they'll have assessments, mental health assessments, like physical therapy, and then also work. And our plan is for them to start for 6 months to a year. And then after they've spent enough time at Lesco, if they feel they are ready to move into the other side of our factory, which has different working hours, different pay, um, they can graduate from basically protective employment into the workspace, into a full-time job. So that program starting in September, we're quite excited about that. And those sort of programs have enabled us to maintain this sort of commitment to the disabled workforce while we scale and grow the business. So beyond South Africa, so we've been actively seeking business opportunities in the SADC region, so all of the neighboring countries to South Africa. The unemployment problem is just as big. There's a lot of hunger there for our sort of business model. So yeah, I think in the next year to 2 years, the Lesco products will be sold outside of South Africa, which is something that we're quite excited about. And looking back at the last 6 months in our business, what we did is to keep up with the times and to try and also cater for not just changing environments in South Africa, but to become a globally competitive manufacturer. We introduced a lot of technology. So we brought in some semi-robotics into our factory, and we focused on 4 divisions, and we designed this equipment not to replace jobs, but to empower jobs. So we've got people who are able-bodied or disabled doing a manual portion of the assembly process, then handing it over to a machine which does the last 60%, but at 5 times the output. So we trialed this in April. It's been very successful. And we're now looking at designing the next phase of semi-automation, which will be installed in our factory to help the rest of the divisions keep up with the growth. And again, understand technology, understand, how does AI play a role in manufacturing? How do we better utilize, what is out there in a very South African context business, but to remain competitive, which is always our key goal. So that's looking back at the business, how we've done things, what's made us unique. Also, I hope, I did touch on it, but I can maybe go into it a bit more detail, is how do we remain competitive against China? Because that's always a question that we get asked. And there are a few things that we do. One is going directly to retail definitely made us more competitive. Two, we design our products in a way that they can be assembled very quickly and very efficiently. We're always on the lookout for sourcing materials at the right price. So we have a sourcing office overseas, and this sourcing office will look at where's the best material to buy, where do we buy the best components, how do we make our tooling the most efficient, the most reliable. So we're on a plane all the time. We're always on the go, looking for the right suppliers and the right partners, and then also innovation. So we like to innovate in the space. We like to design products that we think have got some really unique features, which give us another opportunity to sell to our customers. But it's about getting the buy-in of our customers to enable us to scale. And once, in our experience, once South African manufacturers can scale, they can be globally competitive. Our space is a little bit unique because South Africa has a different standard of electrical products. It isn't as easy for China or India or Vietnam to manufacture at the same sort of scale because it's a very small market. So I'm really talking quite specifically to our space, but I think there are lessons that could be shared and probably implemented in other businesses to enable other manufacturing businesses to be more competitive. So just some of the lessons for growing manufacturers: watch your customers. A distributor today can be a competitor tomorrow. Very hard lesson that we learned. Um, What's interesting, actually, just touching back on that, is that one particular customer who took their business away from Lesco returned a year ago, and we now manufacture all of their products for them under their brand in our factory. So it did do a full 180. When we went direct to retail, we became their biggest competitor. And years later, they returned, and we have a contract with them now to manufacture their products for them. So it was a very interesting life lesson. Um, we took the high ground when they did stop dealing with us. We still kept the door open. We took the high road, something that my dad has always taught us is, take the high road, be the bigger person in the room, understand that business can change. And that lesson definitely paid off. Sequence growth deliberately, so scale should follow capability, not outrun it. Understanding what you do and what you do really well. Direct relationships to de-risk the business. So our relationships with retailer is very important, but not just with the buyer, with the buyer's boss, with the procurement manager, with the planner, with the merchandise executive, really with two or three different layers of people at certain retailers, because buyers can change. So that's very important. And then let purpose scale with the business. So inclusive hiring can be a growth strategy. And that's something that we've really learned has paid dividends. Something that we tell people is having our business model doesn't guarantee us the business, but it always guarantees us the meeting. And that's often the hardest part, is getting a meeting with the right person. And after we get to tell our story, we invite them into the factory. We put them on a production line. They make a product that they would ultimately sell, and they work side by side with traditionally unemployable people or able-bodied people, but they're sitting on a production line making a product, and it's a very different experience for them versus seeing a product that's imported from China. So that's the presentation. I'd love to take any questions, open up the floor.